It is the moment that you all have been waiting for, or at least four of you in Iowa. This is the season 6 premiere of How Not to Suck at Divorce.
Wow. We are here. And guess what, everybody? I am out of my son's closet. We're so fancy now. Andrea sent me some, big device that I have to record the podcast on. And she is making me, despite my, fighting it about it all the time, she's making me do videos this season. So if you want to see us and instead of just hearing us, we're going to be online.
We are going to be on the World Wide Web, on the YouTube. We are here. And yeah, I kind of feel elevated, I have to say. Like, we're in like fancy studios. We made like these little studios in our homes. We're out of our kids' closets. We were joking around earlier that now we're doing video that we have to like look good every day. But let's be real, I give it like 2, 3 episodes tops when I'm still wearing makeup, and then it's gonna be the pile of dog trash that we all know and love because I can't keep this up.
I know, I know. And you know what? There's just, thank God for some videos, you just don't even see how bad you look or feel through the video.
I know,
So we're going to be
I know.
doing a whole masquerade for you this year. And you never know if we're
Masquerade.
truly, yes, if we're truly put together or it's just a show. But that's why we're doing this show. We're doing it for you.
Right. Maybe we should have like a contest for people where they have to guess just by listening to it. Like, are they dressed this day or are they in some version of pajamas? And then they go to YouTube and they see how terrible we look with our blue light reading glasses on and like me wrapped in some form of like a big blanket because I'm recording in the basement. And so it's really cold down here. Like right now I'm in like a sleeveless dress and I'm freezing. So there's that. So there's gonna be lots of blankets, and I'm guessing that the house plants behind Morgan's head are only gonna grow. I want a new house plant actually
I've got a
every
lot of plants.
episode.
You can't even see it, but there are so many damn plants behind me, and you can only see one, and it's large, and it's hopefully it will grow, although it may be fake. But again, it's for you to
You don't
decide.
know.
Fake, you don't know.
We don't know. Take a vote. And that's one of the things that we're talking about today, right? Are these like the shit that we believe that we read online, much like, when you bought that plant from thesearealplants.com, you thought it was real. You bought it, you spent your money, and guess what? It's not a real plant because I can tell you I'm no plant what's a plant person called? A
A
person who knows a lot of
a horticulturist.
a horticulture. Well, they got the first part right. But, I'm not a horticulture I can't say that word. I can't say many words. Podcasting is a really good career for me, but I can tell that that's a fake plant. So I hope that you weren't duped. It's a fake plant. It's a fake
Judging.
plant.
You're so judgy
It's
today.
a
Why are
fake
you doing
plant
it?
because I'm using this as a segue, my love. We don't want our listeners to be duped. We don't want our listeners to read things online on the World Wide Web
The Google
or
machine.
in the Google machine, which you have a big thing about the Google machine. I know you try to keep a lot of your clients off the Google machine.
Yes, because every day, when you're going through a divorce, you're in a bad place to begin with, and you think that you could just go to the Google machine, type in your question, and you're going to get valid answers. And the bottom line is, you usually get the wrong answers, or you're getting answers that maybe don't apply to your case. It's just like when you go to the doctor. I always say this: when you go to the doctor, do you go into the doctor and say, "I'll have what my neighbor's having"? I'm having the same symptoms as my neighbor. It's the same with divorce and the Google machine. We keep calling it that as a joke just to lighten the mood. But you're going to get some pretty bad advice if you're
Right.
using it as your compass of your divorce.
Well, let's one up the Google machine and I'll raise you a Facebook moms group. I
Ooh.
mean, come on.
Well, it's
You
just
want
like,
to
I mean, if you're going to be doing that, you might as well just get your magic 8 ball out.
I mean, let's just like pull a village of idiots. And like, here's the thing. There are some, like, I mean, I'm on Facebook mom groups, and some of these, like, that's where I go for a plumber or a painter, a candlestick maker, like everything like that. But you cannot ask a question about something as specific and intricate and complex as a divorce and expect your magic 8 ball, or, it's going to be Outlook unknown, right? But that's the problem is on Facebook, no one comes out and says, like, well, we really can't tell you. Instead, it's like, absolutely don't do this and make sure you do that. And most of the time, these people don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Also, it's just cancel culture. I feel like people just want to agitate each other. So when you're out there and you're getting advice from these groups, take it with a grain of salt because you could be getting it from somebody who's in the worst place,
Yeah.
been through the worst thing, and now they're going to give you the advice. And so just be kind of careful with being on that Google machine or on the Facebook groups.
I think the biggest issue that I have with it, because this is like where I feel like I really did myself in with my divorce, is it gave me an unrealistic expectation for my
Mhm.
experience. And that is something that really makes or breaks your divorce experience, if you will. If you have a realistic expectation of what's to come, you're going to have far fewer surprises, right?
100%, 100%. But and before we get into our episode today, which kind of
Mhm.
goes towards this, online era of trying to figure your divorce out, I want to ask you because we have our own Facebook community for how not to suck at divorce. What is it like being in that community for the listeners who haven't joined there yet? And by the way, if you are a listener that has not joined there, you can join anonymously. We have to let you in, we monitor it, we make sure everything's appropriate. But tell us, Andrea, how do you think that community is?
So here's the difference with the how not to suck at divorce community. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. The difference is that I'm the admin. So we're not going to let people give bad advice. We're going to make sure that everything is vetted and honest. And for people who are members, you know that if somebody asks a legal question and I'm tagged in the question so I can see it, I always screenshot it and send it to Morgan. And Morgan will give a response. And then I will then take a picture of that response and say, per Morgan, here are some steps that you should take. And every single advice is followed with, you need to run this by your attorney.
Right.
You can't just go rogue and you can't walk into your attorney's office and say, okay, I was like on like my Facebook group and like they think that like your strategy really isn't going to work for me. So I think we need to change a few things.
Mhm. And remember, this podcast is for entertainment purposes. I'm not here giving legal advice. However, I am a divorce lawyer and have been through pretty much every scenario. So I am talking about our experience and my experience as a lawyer. And we are talking about how Andrea, perceived the process that she went through. I think that's what makes our podcast special. So
Right.
with that, let's hop into whether things that people hear a lot in divorces are a myth or maybe they're truth. And so I know you have some questions for me.
Okay, so here's how this little game is going to work. This is the episode today. We're going to be doing some myth busting. I'm going to give Morgan a myth or a fact. And then she will tell us if what I'm throwing her way is something that has any factual evidence behind it or if it's just something that needs to be thrown out with your ex. Ha 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 ha. I came up with that like right on the spot.
You are
So
so smart. You are so
I'm
smart.
so clever. Okay. Can you and should you and what does it mean to take someone to the cleaners?
Ooh. Okay. So I think the question should have been phrased, is this true?
We're off to a good start.
is is this a truth or a fact or a myth when someone says that? And I have to go with my what I see all the time, which is this is a myth. I dislike when people say these types of things, and I'll tell you why.
Mhm.
Because usually, if you're saying that you're taking someone to the cleaners, you're taking yourself to the cleaners. And what does that mean? I mean, if you're taking someone to the cleaners, that means, in my mind, a lot of litigation, a lot of nastiness, a lot of money that you're running through. Well, guess what? In a marriage, generally, you're running through both money. So you're running through the marital estate. And so that's leaving you with less dollars in your pockets. So you have to kind of in those scenarios, there's a lot of anger, and we get it. We understand it. And there might be a reason to try to take someone to the cleaners or agitate them. That's something you want to talk to with your attorney. And listen, if you know all the risks and you know what you're going to be spending and you know what's going to be coming out of your pocket and you say, yes, this is for me, your attorney may say, let's go. But I would say 90% of the time when someone says that and we get down that road and we start that up, it doesn't go that way.
Why don't we elaborate a little bit on what that phrase even means? Because I think that there might be some confusion for people who don't hear that phrase a lot. Because when I hear the phrase of like somebody wants to take someone to the cleaners, I'm thinking that it's somebody who wants to take their ex spouse for everything that they're worth.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're saying. They're trying to take them for everything that they're worth and or take them for, or spend a lot of money, I would say, on a certain issue. And they're going to go to the ends of the earth to win that issue.
Okay, clarification accepted. And now I have to say that we're totally getting used to doing video. And for people who are watching this episode on YouTube, you're going to see I just did like the time out move, asking Morgan if she needed to do a time out, forgetting that this freaking video is going to be shown. I think I'm so inconspicuous, mouthing to you, do you want to go to break? Like, duh.
You're living it with us. So come on along for the ride. We are here.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's good.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So the cleaners is a myth unless you're talking about taking yourself to the cleaners, because ultimately, if you're looking to drown someone else of all of their money, you're going to end up taking all your own money. Okay.
Mhm.
Here's the next one. Can let's just say, can a mom or can the co-parent A, which I guess is typically a mom, can they keep the house no matter what if they want to keep the house?
So generally where I practice, that's a myth. That is not always a given. So, there's a dance, and I think we talk about this in our divorce crash course, which there's this
Mhm,
special dance about who wants the house, who can afford to keep it, and what options people have to keep the house.
mhm.
So usually where I am, there's a lot of negotiation around the house, especially where the children live, who wants to keep it. And at the end of the day, if the people really truly cannot agree, and it's one of their biggest sticking points, at least where I practice, most of the judges will say, then put it on the market, sell it. That's an order. I would say about 10% of the time it gets to that. Usually 90% of the time we work out some kind of creative solution.
Which means, I mean, going back to the idea that it's a myth, there's no statute, certainly in Illinois law, that says if mom wants to keep the house, then damn it, mom is keeping the house. It's going to come down to, can you afford to keep this house?
Can you afford it? Also, is there some big dispute? Do both people really want this house? Because
Mhm.
the easiest thing, if both people are digging their heels in and saying, no, this is my house. I want it. I want it. The judge is just going to say, well, I'm not going to play around with this. Put it on the market.
Yep. 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 Which I feel like tends to be with a lot of things, right? Because judges ultimately don't want to make a decision that they're not it's kind of like the old cut the baby in half thing, like that old biblical
Yes.
fable, like, yeah, now we're going to get into Bible stuff. Never thought we'd do that on this show. Okay, here's the next myth that we see a lot online, especially on the Facebook groups. Oh, don't worry, Susan. A mom is never going to have to pay alimony, no matter how much more you make.
Ooh, this is a huge myth and something that I'm seeing way more of in the last 10 years. I am seeing moms really step up to the plate, whereas before, 10 years plus ago, I would say
Mhm.
it was still kind of where dads were the expectation as dads, or the other side was out working, making the money, where the mom was really the primary caretaker of the children. Now we're seeing a lot of households with two people working and the mom not only working, but taking care of the children. And a lot of times, the women in the relationship, I have now seen them making more at times than the spouse, maybe the husband. And so that's a new thing that we really didn't always have a long time ago. And so that is absolutely a myth. It really, you have to take into consideration many factors, but the biggest thing is what is each side making? And at the end of the day, let's just say it's a mom or if it's a dad, it's the same thing. The standard is the same. If you are making all the money and doing all the things at the house, you're still making all the money, and we have to take that into consideration.
Can't escape the alimony, friends. tough to escape. Okay, let's move on to the next myth. And this one's a little bit more complicated. This one is about parenting stuff. And it has to do with the parent who's willing to be more flexible being favored in court versus the parent who is following everything to the T that the documents state. Let me elaborate a touch here. Let's say that co parent A is saying, I know that we signed these documents like, 4 years ago when we got divorced, but things are different now. And I feel like our kids are being treated like cattle and they're being herded around back and forth. And that's not what they want to do. And I think that the judge is going to agree with me and force my ex to be more flexible.
I'm
Myth
kind of just sitting here.
or
I'm like
fact?
thinking this through because I think there's a lot of questions embedded in that one, scenario.
Okay.
So let's kind of decipher what we're talking about here. I think what you're saying is a few questions. One is if one parent's more flexible and one parent really wants to stick to the agreement, will the judge side with the more flexible parent? And the answer is generally no. Is that what you were asking?
I mean, yeah, I think that yeah, but keep going because I think you're gonna answer more as you explain.
Okay. And what I mean by that is, look, the document, especially the parenting agreement, that is ideally a document that you negotiate, that's a living document that hopefully you can take after you negotiate it and sign it and enter it and put it into a drawer and never look at it again. That is the ideal thing. That's what we want and we hope for most couples. But there are some couples that really live by it or have to live by it, especially in high conflict cases. So they're not able to put it into the drawer. They're living that day to day. And sometimes I see people entering into the agreement, and one is saying, I'm going to live by this. And the other one is saying, but let's be more flexible with the needs of the kids. And let's just, kind of bob and weave depending on what they need that day. Well, if you have one side that's really sticking to the agreement, unfortunately, you're going to be stuck with that agreement. So the moral of the story is be careful with what you're negotiating. Make sure you can live with it. And then I kind of hop into Andrea's other embedded question, which is if it's not working for you, what do you do? And that is why parenting time is always modifiable upon some sort of a change, at least where I practice. And you would say, hey, this isn't working for my kids anymore. They're older, they have different activities, they're not doing well mental health wise, they're not doing well activity wise. Whatever the situation is, it's supposed to be something that's maneuvering with the kids.
Right. So, and something that I'll add to this is that if you are divorced or you're divorcing someone who you're having a more challenging time seeing eye to eye, and you can anticipate that this is not going to be somebody who's going to be flexible and, quote unquote, play ball with you, then you're really looking at having these documents modified over time. And the only way that they can be modified if there really is some sort of a significant change. It can't just be like, well, I think it's time to change it, right? Like you gotta
Yeah.
really have it organized.
Yes, you do need to make a case, especially if the other side is saying, no, this parenting
Mhm.
agreement is perfect. And I do see this a lot where one side's super hurt by the divorce or maybe can't get over the divorce and the other one's kind of just moved on. And so they're saying, and where I see it a lot is, okay, I know my parenting night is Tuesday night, but I have a work event. And of
Right.
course, under our agreement, I'm going to give you the kids because I can't get out on my work event. Hey, but can I have them instead on Thursday? And that person says, no, Thursdays are my nights every week. Those are my nights. And then the other person says, but wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to be flexible. And they say, here's the document. Too bad, so sad. So that's the unfortunate reality at times.
So you said something that brings me to the next myth, which is, well, you talked about somebody, still being pissed off about, the reason of for the divorce and blah blah blah. So let's go here. Well, my ex is really gonna get it in court because he or she had an affair.
It depends on the state you're living in or the area or the country. I know we have listeners all over the world. So for you, it depends on where you're residing. You have to ask the lawyer that you're working with or get good counsel because everywhere is different. where I practice, we're in a no fault state, meaning, if you where it really kind of gets tricky is if you have children. So I'm going to do it into two buckets. If you have no children and you go out and have 10 affairs and, do whatever you want, really, unless you're spending a lot of money for a non-marital purpose on these side, pieces, for lack of a better term, the judge doesn't care. They don't want to hear about it.
It sounds like you're describing a true horticulturist.
I agree that horticulturist is with 10 other horticulturists. And
There
guess
you
what?
go.
The
Growing
big
all the
bad
plants.
judge, they don't care. They don't care most of the time. Now, let's talk about if you have children. Where this could get into tricky territory is if you have 10 horticulturists on the side and you can't find the time to spend with your children. So then you go in and say, well, I should get a good parenting schedule. I should have a lot of time. And they're saying, well, what about this horticulturist over there that you're with every Monday night? Right? So we have to be careful with our decisions. The other thing, obviously, is money. And I just talked about it. If you're spending money on these side, planters, then you want to make sure that you essentially make a good decision with what you're doing.
Right. And I also think that another area where the horticulturist can get into a little bit of trouble is with money, right? So I think that you have that whole dissipation situation where if somebody's spending a lot of the marital funds to pay for their fellow horticulturists, hotel rooms or whatever, then that is something that could be looked at and not necessarily quote unquote punished for, but certainly looked at, right?
Yeah, and there may be a claim for reimbursement. I mean, that all comes into play. But
Mhm.
for the most part, if you're starting out the process or you're in the middle of the process and you think your soon to be ex has these people on the side, you want to ask your attorney, how in your area does a judge look at that and what are the ramifications there?
Okay, I've got a quick one for you. You ready?
Okay, let's do it.
The family courts look down on dads.
Hmm. That is a big, big myth, especially these days. I think that at one point, maybe they had the ability to say that. I think things were kind of backwards back in the day.
Mhm.
But what I've seen is a big shift in parenting, in responsibilities, etc. And I'm seeing dads get more time than I've ever seen them get before. In fact, a lot of places, at least, we're kind of in a place where a lot of people start at 50-50. They
Mhm.
want a 50-50 parenting schedule. And that is not looked down upon with a father. And it's kind of, sexist to think about it either way. It's, what's in the best interest of the children? And that's where they should kind of fall. And, Andrea and you and I talked about this, I think, with a therapist who's a child therapist. And basically, the one of our episodes talked about the fact that it's really all about your kids. You got to step back and see what's best for your children.
That's the hardest part of this whole thing, you know?
So
Like like doing that, I mean, it's so I think that people often think that they're doing that because nobody's going to come out and admit, like, fuck these kids, man. I'm going to get you back. But I think it's hard because what you want to do keeps creeping back in,
yeah.
even though you know that your focus should just be on what's right for them. But it's easier said than done for sure. Okay, here's one that this I think is the most unfortunate of all of the myths. So let's go ahead and talk about it now. Abuse is going to be punished and stopped once you get in front of a judge.
Mm. Are we talking about, I would assume, physical abuse or mental or both?
You know what? I think that for this, making this, I think that we need to stick to not physical because I think physical lives in a little bit of a different world because when you get into physical abuse, you obviously have like a crime that's been committed, right? You've got a domestic situation and things are documented and da 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 da. Let's talk more about like mental and emotional abuse, like someone
Mhm.
is financial abuse, like all these things where someone has been completely controlled. And there is this hope that the judge is gonna come down and really slap someone on the wrist and the behavior is going to change.
Mhm. So I think that there's this myth that the judge is going to live in your case. And I wish kind of they did because I think they would sift through a lot of things. But the reality is, these judges are overloaded. If you're in front of a judge, they have probably hundreds, if not thousands, of other cases. They've got limited time for your case. So, the difficult part for a lawyer is that we have to stick to the relevant facts for that hearing or that trial. And abuse is not always relevant. It is to show different patterns, et cetera. We can do things to cut off some of this mental abuse or verbal abuse during the process. But I just want to remind everyone that it doesn't happen overnight. Just because you file something does not happen overnight. In fact, it could take a very long time to get through the divorce process or get to the judge to show what kind of behavior your ex has been exhibiting and stop that behavior or curtail it. At the end of the day, the judge can only do so much. And you kind of have to weigh the risk reward and the cost benefit there. So, does it make sense to keep pushing, pushing, pushing? Will we get to some kind of resolution that makes sense for the money?
Well, and let me add this because, people who follow us on social media are very familiar with the content that we put out there about the ramifications of mental and emotional abuse over a sustained period of time. And it's awful. And if you're going through that, you you've got my heart because I know how gutting that experience can be. But going back to a realistic expectation, even if you do all the right things, even if you use our family wizard and all the other tools that can help you mitigate the exposure, you're not able to change somebody else's behavior. It's not possible. If and if somebody is behaving in an abusive way because they have their own shit that they have to work through. I mean, typically, the saying hurt people, right? Your soon to be ex is not doing this for sport, most likely because contrary to current public opinion, most people out there are not narcissists. They're just a general asshole or they have a different type of personality disorder that's causing them to behave like this, whether it's fear, they feel like they're backed into a corner and they're lashing out at you like an angry pit bull or whatever else it is. Most of these people are not sociopathic narcissists.
Right, but and agreed. And I don't want it to come off like, there's nothing we can do for you. There's lots of things we can do for you with these types of behaviors. It's just that, will you get in front of a judge to basically vomit out all the harassing, horrible abuse you've dealt with right away? No. So setting realistic expectations, which is big on our podcast, you will get there. We will get it curtailed. It might take time, and ultimately, the judge may never hear every gritty detail of your abuse that you've gone through. So just know that, but know that a good lawyer cares about what you've been through and will only use the parts that are relevant in your case.
Right. Because if you go on and on and on, you are just going to spend a ton of money with no real benefit. But here's what I want to say. You might not have that day in court where your ex gets bent over and spanked. Um, of course, now I'm like picturing like something really pornographic. So sorry for putting that in your mind. But what you will get, and especially from listening to our show, is you're going to get the tools so that you have your moment where all of this mental anguish is not going to affect you the way that it once did. And that's the day in court.
Right.
That's what we want to give you because that's where the real healing begins because you only control you and how all this stuff affects your kids, which really segues into the next myth, which is I'm always going to feel this bad. I'm always going to be this miserable.
Okay, that's a huge myth. Huge myth. We always talk about this, and I always say it. And, I wish I had my phone. I will show you what I got. So I was just talking about this with Andrea. We always say 5 years out from probably the day you file for divorce,
Mhm.
honestly, you will be a different person. You will be happy again. You will feel like yourself. You might feel like a new human, honestly. And I was just telling Andrea, in the last week and a half, I have gotten two things from clients. One is a client who left a marriage that she really didn't want to leave. She was happy, but for really big infidelity, and they just could not get it back together. Left the marriage. She was convinced that she was never going to be happy again, etc. She's only 3.5 years out. I got a text that she is engaged again, which I was, blown away and so happy. She said she's the happiest she's ever been. And 2 days ago, I got a text from another client who was a high-powered woman at a job. She was struggling in her marriage, she had children, and I told her she was struggling in whether to stay in her job, whether to leave, and I said, "Listen, in 5 years, let me know where you're at because you're gonna be at a better job, you're gonna make more money, and you're gonna be much happier." And the text I got this week was, "Hey, you told me to contact you in 5 years and let you know where I was. I want you to know I took a way better job. I'm making double the money and I'm the happiest I've ever been." And so those are the type of texts that just solidify that what we're saying, it sounds like a long time, but it will go fast. 5 years will go so fast. And Andrea, I want you to give our listeners, I mean, you're about there. I
I'm
mean,
5.
what do you feel? What do you
Yeah,
feel?
I'm 5 years, and it's really funny because the post that's going out this evening on our social media is all about it's really, really odd, is it the text bubble over the video says, "5 years ago, I made one decision that changed the rest of my life." Swear to God, that's what it says.
Really?
And then the next text bubble that pops up says, I decided that I was worthy of being loved. And because that was, I think, my first realization that because of what I had gone through, I think I believed for so long that this was as good as it was going to get for me. Right. And then once you realize, like, no, 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 you are worthy of so many more things. You have been holding back from so much. And it so much has changed. So when I got divorced, I was completely financially devastated. I mean, I got divorced with $0. My father supported me pretty much 100%, and I didn't have much, and I was a shell of a person, riddled with a panic disorder, falling the fuck apart. Now, I live in a beautiful new home. I make more money than I've ever made as an adult. I mean, look, we host one of the number 1 podcasts in the world about divorce. I mean, what? I'm
Yeah.
in the healthiest relationship I've ever been in, and I 100% know that even on my worst days, I am worthy of being loved.
Mhm. And not to mention, I don't want to speak for you, but your children are okay.
My children have gone through a radical evolution, and it is absolutely incredible to watch children who go through a high conflict divorce and come out on the other side being the most, I mean, they are truly emotionally kind of almost like light years ahead of other children their age because of what they know and what they understand about the world. So, and that, that doesn't happen on its own. It doesn't take a village. It takes, therapists and a fucking, medicine cabinet of motions and potions and all kinds of things to help you get there. But with that village, you can get there, right? It's like, I think I always talk about this with friends, but there was once, I think I even talked about it on the show once. There was once this episode of Oprah from many, many years ago where a woman who went through an absolutely devastating loss, she lost her entire family in one day, talked about somebody said, "Well, how did you realize that you needed help?" Because this was like pre time when everybody was in therapy and we all talked about mental health and taking medication and blah blah blah, right?
Right.
And this woman said, "Well, when you do your dishes, do you do it completely on your own?" And everybody just kind of stared at her. And she said, "Well, no, you need dish soap. And if there's a lasagna pan that has cheese crusted to the side of it, maybe you let it soak overnight. And maybe sometimes you have to use a more aggressive scrub brush. And maybe other times you have to wear gloves or you do this." She's like, it takes a whole battery of tools to complete any task. So what makes you think that recovering from something like this, you're going to be able to do on your own. And that has stuck with me. I mean, this must have been 20 years ago. And this has always stuck with me that you can't just do things on your own.
Mhm.
And I love, and this is kind of segueing into like wrapping up this episode, but that's exactly why we do this show is that we're another tool in your toolbox.
Right. You're so right about that. And, you know, you don't do this on your own. You have a team, whether you want to admit it or not. You've got your lawyer. You're going to have a lawyer. Hopefully, they're going to be your biggest advocate. And we always say, you know, save Tina for drinks at the bar. She's not your go to. We want you to have really good go tos with very good direction. We don't want them making the process worse for you.
Right. Right. Go out to margaritas with Tina. Don't let Tina fill out your financial agreement. Don't let Tina tell you what to do with your parenting time. Martini Tina should stay Martini Tina.
Agree.
So let us be the smart friends because that's what we're here for. We're going to be here to support you, to guide you, and we might not have every single answer because especially, with Morgan's jurisdiction is the state of Illinois. So, if we can't help you with your question, we're going to make sure that we can direct you to the right person who can.
That's right. We answer all of our direct messages, all of our emails. And guess what? If you need a referral, send us a message. We have helped hundreds of people get to good lawyers or at least the right place to start talking about things. And remember, divorce is not easy. This sometimes is a day by day process. Sometimes it's an hour by hour process, and that's okay.
It is. Even on the days when you feel like, wait, you just said that's okay. This is not okay. The way that I'm feeling right now is not okay. Even that's okay. There's going to be bad days. There's going to be really, really bad days. And then all of a sudden, I fucking promise you, it is going to get so much better. And just like Morgan's clients, and just like me, you're going to look back one day and you're going to say, oh my God, man, I went through it. And now here I am on the other side, and then you're going to be able to help other people. It's a beautiful community of people who have decided that getting divorced is an event, but it's how you respond to this event that'll make or break you. You can utilize this to propel you to being the absolute best person that you can be. Don't let it be what paralyzes you or devastates you or puts you in this place of, I'm never going to get over this.
Right? We want you to come out better than if you didn't find our podcast. That's why we do this. So if you like our podcast, feel free to share it. We don't care. Send it to your ex. The more, the merrier. If you need something, contact us. Join our private Facebook community. And if you love our podcast, please leave us a review. It means the world to us. And remember, not every day is a good day, but if you wake up the next day, that's a good thing. So we have got this.
And you, my friends, can do this. We have got you.